Hello, welcome back to Idad Your Life and to our workshops on the Bach cello suites. I'm Jean-Guihen Queyras, and today my guest will be none less than the extraordinary Bach scholar Christoph Wolff. He will be with us in about 20 minutes. And before that, we will talk about the Prélude from the Fifth Suite. This is the day where we enter this extraordinary, quite fascinating universe of the Fifth Suite by Bach. Before that, I want to extend a short apologize to you, but a sincere, heartfelt apologize for last week. For those of you who had the intention to watch the workshop, we had a little technical problem with Adagio, and so the episode could not take place. And I want to say that Vito Juraj, the composer, the Slovenian composer who was going to be my guest, will be, of course, my guest. He will be back in a future episode, probably in January. I want to take 1 minute. I will make an exception to what I've done this year to talk about the situation in which we are. Obviously, I want to keep this episode to the essential, which is to talk about the beauty of the music of Bach. Some decisions were made yesterday in France to keep the theaters closed until probably, beginning of January for sure, and probably much later. I want to say at this point, I can say officially that I strongly disagree with this. I absolutely join the outrage that this has provoked in the cultural world. I just want to say this. I was a month ago, for example, in São Paulo, where they had decided to reopen the theaters. The theater had gone at length to make sure people were at social distance and that all the process that each viewer, spectator, could come with their ticket on their phone, could sit at their place, go back home without touching anything, and while being all the time at very secure, healthy social distance. Knowing that this is possible, knowing that all the organizers of theaters, of concert halls have had built already and prepared everything for this scenario, this decision is simply not only unjustified, it is unacceptable, it is very unfair, and it is extremely dangerous. I needed to get this out of myself, and now, now let's go back to our topic. Prélude from the Fifth Suite. I play a little bit, and then I will say a few words. I will stop here for now. So this is a so-called ouverture à la française. And, well, what does it mean? It means a lot of dotted rhythms and all the elements that give a notion of, well, in a way, noblesse, but also movement. And for this, we will see how Bach uses this to create his dramatic and the language of all of this. But the first thing I would like to start with is the pulse, as almost always in Bach. Pulse is the time, and time comes first. And in this case, this music is in 2. in so-called alla breve. Why is it so important? Because if you have this large, generous pulse, within this pulse, you can swing, your playing can live, it can come to life. It is not in the chains of a smaller, regular beat. One little remark about this, one of the first text editions, which was a big step, but which is quite old, but which people still use a lot. It's the first Berenreiter edition, on which the musicologist Wenzinger worked. And he did a great job. It was a great first step in looking for what is actually in the music, in the text. But in this particular case, there are a few mistakes. And here there is one absolutely huge mistake, really super important. It says in this edition that a lot of us use, it says that it is in 4 beats. And if you are in 4 beats, you are just on the wrong path to bring this music to life. A lot of my students come to me and have difficulty to find the right tempo, the right pulse when starting this piece, because it starts with a sort of, not improvisation, but something which is not pulsative, which is an open octave, and then this millism, and then so they say it's difficult. We start with this, and then we have to find the tempo while we have already started. Well, I have a little trick here that I want to give you. Before you start playing this piece, think of your dotted rhythm that come later in the piece. Because this dotted rhythm, there is a tempo that feels right. I'm not with variations, of course, and depending on your mood and all these things. But if you get to, you immediately feel, oh, that's wrong. Now we are stuck in 4 beats, and it cannot be much faster. So once I have this in me, before I start playing, and then I aim at the middle of the bar, the C. And then I accelerate the 16th note because that's what the music asks for, to that this movement that we are, sort of whirlwind. And this acceleration enables me to arpeggiate the very dramatic accord of the second bar. That was the trick for those of you out there, my friend cellists. Now, I will come back to the music itself. Bach immediately sets the stage within the first 2 bars by creating this feeling of extremes. The first accord is just octave, which some people like to describe it, say that's the interval of emptiness. One can argue about this, but this is something there is a certain neutrality about it. And in the second bar, he actually brings us to the most dramatic interval and dissonant interval that one can play on the cello, which is there is the tonica and a diminished 7th chord on top, which is totally dissonant to the pedal C. So he couldn't have reached a stronger contrast. And this immediately we know, okay, this is going to be a dramatic piece with very, very strong contrast. After doing this, then he starts constructing little elements of phrases. modulation to F minor. He does the same harmonic steps in a more dramatic way over 4 strings. At the same length of 2 bars. And then he this time 3 bars instead of 2. That brings us, for the first time, we leave the pedal of C to reach G dominant. And from there, we are going to go to other dramatic events. Again, I come back to a little tip for interpreters out there. Another thing that a lot of my students struggle with is double dotting or not double dotting. Playing this when there is a rhythm, quarter note plus 4/16 note with a slur note. That's why it's technically written like this. So you don't want to play like this. You don't want to play just mathematically as is written here. And then some students say, well, but if I double dot, it gets also very cut. Exactly, that's the point. So what you should do, what you should keep in mind, is that the fact that you are really in tune, in alla breve, that you want to you can swing freely within this large beat, which means you don't have to be double dotted, like twice as fast, or exactly mathematically as printed, because none of these are really alive. What you want to have is something that feels right for you in the moment of how do you want to bring us from here. Focus on these main notes, and the little notes in between, they are smaller notes, and therefore in the hierarchy they are, how can I say, they are there to help the main material. So they should bring us from one note to the next and experiment what's possible. And the last tip I want to give, don't stop too much. Stop and come back in the bow, but try to try not to stop too much the long note, otherwise you will get this feeling of cutting the phrase. Now back to our story. We have reached the dominant here. Again, the melism. So we start with the same material, but as you see now, we go on in a much longer phrase with one dramatic accord following the next. Very dissonant. Dissonant. Diminished chord, anyway quite dramatic. Now we finally reach a normal chord, F minor. The bass comes and calms us down in a way. And brings us back to E flat major, which is of course a less dramatic tonality than F minor. But then we big ambitious, that's also energy and drama. Also a dissonant chord. And then cadenza in the sense of improvisation. And we finish this introduction in G, which is our dominant. And now comes the interesting part. We will have our our only fugue by Bach for solo cello. So we, as you can imagine, we cherish it more than anything. And of course, we are aware that this is a very modest fugue if you compare it to all the fugue of the Wohltemperierte Klavier, of the Kunst der Fuge, and even of the C major fugue from the violin sonata, for example, which is a monument. And this one is much more modest. But this is our fugue. We love it, and I see so much beauty and in it. And so I will not let myself be disappointed by its relatively modest size. Now, as much drama and as much movement the introduction had, the prelude, if remember that a fugue for Bach is I have a material, I work on it, I work and I work on it, I reverse it, I do all these things, and at the end, this has brought us to something bigger, to something more ambitious. So the reason I say this is that for you performers out there, rather start in a quite objective way. Don't put too much drama at the beginning of your fugue. You've had plenty of drama in the introduction. So as you see, oh, I love this thing. A little suggestion for our French cellist: play on the duality of this sujet contre sujet, the sort of answering pattern between the upper voice and the other voice, which sort of brings the dialogue. Now, and if you give your theme a clarity at the beginning, it will be this much easier for your listeners to follow the theme as the piece unfolds, and to see all its developments. Now we reached a little cadenza here, and then we have a transition, like there will be quite a few. Also working on duality, lower voice. That was a very short 4-bar transition. This I like because the upbeat of the fugue. So I think the G in the bar before the A flat is already the upbeat. Now, I love to see how Bach starts working and knitting, so to say, his theme. First time now that what was our, I will call it the A voice, the upper one, and this is B, A, B. Now, for the first time, the point that we reached now, A is under B, B is on top. Transition, a bit longer one, ascending scales, still with 2 voices. Descending scale. For the first time, the B element is ornamented, so instead of hemiola. Why is this important? Bach is going to give us a lot of hemiolas in this piece at the end of each little section, and it's like a signal that he gives us. He says we are finishing a section, and it's very which I understand as a sort of organized Protestant way to say. So I did something, I brought us to E flat major, cadence. And then we're going to have a little variation of the theme, because now so the A motive, instead of being descending, it's ascending, and so instead of this. Here, for the first time, the B element, which was the answering element, is playing, so to say, by itself. So a lot of ornamentation there. Hemiola. Here, I love this passage because we have the B element, but except it's here for the first time our B element, the answering element, is reversed, is going down and ornamented. But so that's the first time that it's going downwards. Again, the theme in a more clear way, Hemiola and cadenza. So here we enter a phase where Bach lets us look for something, we don't know what. Always a duality between the two voices. Now he's going to have these two voices get further and further apart to create tension. I love this place. The theme with opposed A is down and B is up, but very far away to create room. Now a sort of improvisation because going against the beat. And now a lot of B. Sorry, I don't think I'm playing it that way usually. I want to bring out the thematic element. Stretto, that means instead of every 2 bars, the descending B is coming every bar. And then an extension, that means suddenly my B, which is going to be the slower voice, our theme in its original form, just for a few bars. So it's like if Bach he has created so many variations and so much energy that he says, let's come back to order a little bit, yes? Broken cadenza, that means it's not the bass we expect here. In order, of course, to create, to prolong our story, not finished. It's Cadenza or improvisation. The final pedal of C. Ascending line of the bass, well, the last one. With a dramatic chromatic here. Final cadenza, as you can see, he is again suggesting the chaos that we had at the beginning of the prelude by having slurs that are against the beat. And the tierce picard, the major. So it's extraordinary that despite its relatively modest size, this fugue already fills us with the feeling of accomplishing something. I am horribly late. I tried to be quick, but now is the time that you have all been waiting for, that we are going to be able to talk to our guest, Christoph Wolf. Dear Christoph, are you there? Hello?
I'm there now.
Oh, yes. Dear Christoph, first of all, I apologize for the little delay. It is, so I will make my introduction short. This is such a dream come true for me that you are joining us for this, in this series. Because all my guests, it has always been about giving us perspective on the Bach suites, because, you know, I'm doing the little kitchen stuff, talking about analytical details and things like this. And I think no one on this planet has more sense of perspective on Bach's life, on Bach's work than you do. And therefore, let me shoot the first question. How could you tell us in a few words what is the place of the cello suite in the creation of in the creation of Bach, or and also about the context? How do you see our cello suites, which are so dear to us?
First of all, thank you, Jean-Guihen, for inviting me to your workshop. I'm very pleased to be here. But it's not so easy to define the place for the cello suites. But let me do it in a few words. First of all, they were written or actually completed in Köthen during the 5 years Bach was there at this little court in a tiny principality, politically completely irrelevant, but economically doing quite well. And Bach had a lot of time. His contract didn't really specify lots of duties. The principal duties were in December, namely for the birthday of the prince and for New Year's. So he basically had 11 months without any scheduled activities. And we find him to focus on instrumental music in a general sense, because there were very little activities for vocalists. The court capella contained only 2 singers, so he could focus on instrumental music. And he had an ensemble of exquisite expertise, because the prince in Köthen had hired all the musicians that were fired from the Berlin court in 1714. So these were excellent musicians. And, you know, for example, the Brandenburg concertos were written for them, and Bach focused on things that had not been done before. If you start with the Brandenburg concertos, you know, there were lots of concertos that Italian and German composers had written, but none had dared to come up with scores for, say, 3 violins, 3 violas, three cellos and continuo, or for trumpet and recorder and violin and oboe. The combination of things were just unprecedented, and Bach could focus on new kinds of instrumental sounds. And he also, of course, was primarily a keyboard virtuoso. So what we find in his projects in Köthen, he wrote the Well-Tempered Clavier, preludes and fugues in 24 different keys. So he opens up the tonality that nobody had ever opened up before in such a way. So he wanted to make people feel comfortable on the white and black keys equally. And he also wrote the inventions and symphonias, the inventions for two hands, so that you could really display polyphonic texture, for the left and the right hand. But then, with the symphonias, nobody has three hands. So the trick is how to combine the fingers of the two hands, that the result is a singing tripart polyphony. So, this is, again, unprecedented. And he now turns to, the string ensemble with the leading instruments in the melody line, the discant instrument, the violin, and the cello, the bass instrument, and explores what can be done with it in order to really exploit, the potential of these two instruments. And, Bach's sense for experimentation is really demonstrated in the pieces for solo violin and for unaccompanied cello. And we also need to see them as complementary. In the violin solos, he refers in the autograph score to it as libro primo, as the first book. And then there is the second book. We do not have an autograph for the cello pieces, but it's clearly meant to be the second book. These were pieces that were not exercises, but Bach was aiming for pieces that would be meaningful musical pieces of an autonomous instrumental design. That means you do not miss an accompaniment if you hear just the violin, or if you hear just the cello. So in a way, the place for the cello suites is this context of working for instrumental combinations, either combinations with lots of instruments, as in the Brandenburg concertos, or singling out an individual instrument like the cello and the violin, and pretend they can do everything even without accompaniment.
They can.
Yes, they can. That's what he demonstrated.
Exactly. Christoph, I would have a question now more specifically about the Fifth Suite, which I know you told me this morning when we prepared this show that you love it particularly. It's in C minor. Is it so? Would you say that with Bach, like people say about Mozart, that he had a special, even though he wrote anyway for 24 different keys and all these things, but would you say that he had a special relationship to certain keys, that he's using C minor in other major works in a certain way that is consistent with this sort of more dramatic atmosphere that we have in the Fifth Suite here?
Well, it's certainly true that he had an understanding of certain characters of keys. I mean, it is no coincidence that the concluding choruses of the St. Matthew Passion and the St. John Passion are in C minor. I believe, however, that in the cello suites, he is considering something else, which you have hinted at, but not really defined in the way I would do it. Namely, he is juxtaposing C major and C minor. We have two pieces which are based on the lowest open string of the violoncello. And he approaches the keys in two different ways. I mean, the C major, so in a linear way, he describes the tonal space that he will fill, in measures 3 following. With the C minor suite, he is starting with the open octave. He is starting with a unison. So you only hear C. You do not yet know whether it's minor or major. It happens. And he is building the piece with emphasis on vertical sounds. And, the first chord is a violently dissonant chord, as you have explained. And then, with the flourishes in between, the improvisatory style of this prelude that leads to the fugue, he shows all kinds of harmonic possibilities that make C minor a harmonically more fascinating key than C major. So I see the two suites in C as exploring the minor and major mode possibilities in a very specific way.
I have a question now, which might seem a bit sort of pseudo psychological about Bach, but maybe you can help me with that. I can't help. Well, let's put it that way. What I see in this Fifth Suite is a lot of drama, and yes, he's addressing very, very dark, the darkness in us, in life. I think it's about sort of, to put it very, very, very simply, life and death. But so my point is this: some of my very esteemed colleagues tend to see in it a very dark and desperate piece. I find fascinating how Bach, like some other geniuses, manages to address darkness, to address drama, but never getting despaired. That's my perception of it. I feel in Bach still the optimist, even when when he lets us feel adversity in the music. Is that my little kitchen, or can you relate to any of this?
No, I think you demonstrated that more or less by juxtaposing the fugue and the prelude. I mean, the French Ouverture that opens the piece and it leads into a fugue, which of course is an imaginary fugue. We never hear two voices simultaneously as in a real fugue. So the listener has to somehow become active and compose the fugue in his head or in her head. So, the two parts of the opening movement show two sides of dealing with musical expression. Yum, pum, 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 pum. It's an energetic kind of fugal subject, which is very different from, the dark atmosphere that the composer displays in the initial measures of the prelude. And it's particularly interesting to see what happens in the Saraband, which is an extraordinary piece because it also is in C minor, but he delays the appearance of the C in an extraordinary way because only in measure 4 he reaches the open string as the goal, and it's searching up to that point in a very I would say reflective manner. So, the expression of this saraband is again very different from the initial movement, and I think that's true of every movement in every suite, because he changes the character, and we have a whole panorama of characters in these suite movements.
Mm-hmm. One unfortunately last question, because we have to leave way for the next show on Adagio. But I want to just ask once more. You a bit touched the subject when you presented his time in Cotton and everything, but vocal music as opposed or not as opposed to instrumental music. So, and some people even go and describe it and say, secular music for the instrumental music and sacred music. Would you agree that anyway, maybe it's more a question for me as an instrumentalist, that I am so much, I find that the only way for me to make sense of this instrumental music that I'm playing is to refer to the vocal music of Bach. In a way, what am I trying to say? That I have the feeling that it's a wrong opposition to say there is sacred and secular, and that actually it's all the same, and that when we are just left with our instrument, we are trying to reach for this Graal, which is the vocal music of Bach.
Well, you are absolutely right. There is no juxtaposition in terms of the material Bach deals with. C minor is neither secular nor sacred, to put it bluntly. But with respect to vocal versus instrumental, these elements are mutually informing themselves. Bach was a singer, he was a choir boy, he was a soloist, he was a bass singer as an adult, and he wrote a lot of vocal music, and he also wrote a lot of instrumental music. And I think Bach's vocalists are supposed to learn from instrumentalists, but his instrumentalists are supposed to learn from the specific qualities of vocalists. I mean, in the preface to the inventions, he says that they should inform the player to develop a singing style of playing. So, this is an important aspect. Bach is constantly trying to improve the quality of performance. And, the quality of performance depends very much on what you hear and what you project. And if you are an instrumentalist, you have to keep the qualities of a singer as a model. And for a virtuoso passage of a singer, the singer needs to keep in mind what instruments could do. So the two aspects in music making and in music composition are mutually dependent on one another.
Wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, and I wanted our viewers to hear. Dear Christoph, thank you so much. I am so grateful that you took the time to be with us tonight. And everybody, I wish, I was going to wish you a nice end of the year and everything, but actually next week I will be here again with the Allemande of the Fifth Suite. And this time my guest will be Chris Bezuidenhout, the pianofortist. And yes, until then, stay healthy.
Give him my best, he's a good friend.
Oh, yes, I will, dear Christoph. Thank you so much, Christoph. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Bye-bye. Very pleased.